Okay, it is T minus 1 minute at 8:29, so I'm just getting on to get everything set up. This is really exciting. So I'm gonna wait. I'm just gonna kind of, hello. So I've watched other people go live before on Instagram, and one of the things I always really liked and wanted to do was like greet people as they come on. So be like, hey, I'm Rossi. Hey, Anna F 720. Hey, W Boucher. All right, my sis is coming in. Hey, Justine. So like I was be like try to pronounce it correctly, and some of you are gonna kind of mess me up. I can tell already. The other funny thing is that I'm wearing my glasses, right? So normally I wear contacts, but I was going with the glasses and you could see the ring light in the reflection. So now I'm gonna be like, I know it's kind of cheesy, but it's sort of like a tradition when people go live to start welcoming people. All right, cool. So we have a few people already. I'm just gonna kind of start. So I came up with this idea to go live because it's sort of a more informal way to have a conversation about wine. So when I do my wine tastings, if any of you, I know a bunch of you on, have actually been to my wine tastings, and I try to keep them kind of relaxed and informal and casual and conversational. So I will typically go through, I have my glass of wine right here. Cheers. So I have my wine. But usually at the beginning of a wine tasting, I'll kind of go through how a Somm or how a pro would taste wine, and you talk about the swirl and the smell and the whole 9 yards. So I always do that, and then I kind of go through each aspect of the wine. But when I introduce each wine, I tell a little bit about the wine, the background, maybe some history, maybe some of the tasting notes. But I really want people to ask questions. That's sort of the whole point. And I want it to be like not stuffy, and I try not to use a lot of jargon and be nerdy about it, because I've had experiences with other Somms and other restaurants and stuff, and they kind of like get hung up on the technical aspects of wine, like it's aged in stainless or fermented in barrel fermentation on the age or whatever, and and then things like residual sugar and the grams per liter, and like nobody knows what that means. I mean, some people do, and I could nerd out with the best of them, but it's kind of boring. So I think to have like a more relaxed conversation where people can ask questions, and also the questions are like kind of anonymous, right? Because I'm just looking and seeing. So just feel free to ask, even if you're like, what's the difference between white and red wine? Legit question. So go for it. I'm kind of, so like I said, don't have my glasses on, can't see anything. Just kind of looking. Hey, T-Palm 22. Some of these people here I have known since I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, which is pretty awesome. I'm very, very lucky. And then of course family members have known me even longer than that. All right, so now that we're like in, we have some people, I'll just share with you what I'm drinking tonight. So it's actually a wine I opened a couple days ago. It's sparkling wine. It's a sparkling rosé, and it's still quite bubbly after 3 days, so I'm really pleased about that. And it's really cool wine. So some of you may have seen this in stores. It is readily available. So it's a sparkling wine, not a champagne, coming from New Mexico, of all places. Who would have thought? So there's this winery called Gruet, Gruet. They've been around a while, and they're known for really high quality sparkling wines at a very good price point. So this in particular one, they've been making sparkling rosé for quite a long time. But this one I hadn't tried. This is the Sauvage. Sauvage meaning that it doesn't have any added sugar, or doesn't have a dosage added to it, and I will explain that in just a second. But anyway, this is what I have. It's the last bit of it from the bottle. And hi Molly Hirsch. Hey Izzy, that's my sister. Hey Princess Lala. So fun. All right, so listen, we'll do a little like tutorial. I know some of you have seen me do this before. But anyway, so take your glass of wine. Oh, right, this is really important. So like, hi, say hello. Want to hear you say hi. But tell me if you have a glass of wine, in front of you. Tell me what it is. And you don't have to be drinking wine. So some of my people are sober curious or don't drink. So if you have an alcohol-free wine, maybe it's from Better Roads. That would be awesome. But if you have like an alcohol-free product, or if you have tea or whatever it is tonight, just share with what you're drinking. I'd love to hear. And then if, you know, maybe I'll kind of talk about one of your products. Maybe not the chamomile, but maybe I'll talk about one of the wines that you're drinking. That would be kind of fun. All right, so let me just back up. So tasting the wine. So you kind of look at the color, right? You can kind of put it over something white to get a good eye on the color, just something to notice. And then the color can kind of tell you a lot of different things about the wine. The hue of the color could give you hints about the age. So if it's a white wine, if something's kind of has like greenish youthfulness or more on the golden browner side, it could show that it's more aged. And then with red wine, something that's like a youthful red will be more towards purple, still red, but like towards purple. And then as it gets toward like brick and brown, that would be a sign that the wine has been aged. So anyway, I'm here at like a nice kind of salmon colored rosé. I'm gonna give it a swirl, and anything sparkling you absolutely swirl. Just be aware that those bubbles are gonna get you. Sometimes I forget that and I get aggressive and I go and my eyes are tearing. So you put your nose in, take a nice deep breath, right? Like notice what you're smelling. Think about all the types of fruits, kind of go through your mind, some fruits that you know, what they smell like. Think about it, any herbs, any flowers, purple flowers. You know who you are. Any minerality like stones, any earthy notes. A funny one is like animal barnyard. Those are some kind of fun ones. Or like what's like the tennis balls. I don't do sports really, so like tennis ball container is a funny one that people say. Cat pee, that's also pretty common in certain types of Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand. Take a taste. And then think about the wine on your palate. Is it acidic? Is it dry or sweet? Does it have tannin for a red wine, or even a rosé could have some tannin, or an orange wine could have some tannin? What is the weight of the wine on your palate? Is it heavy? Is it round? Is it sharp? Is it making your mouth water? That's acidity. Does it last? Like after you swallow, do you taste it for a while, or does it kind of end quickly? So those are some things that you kind of are thinking about. Flinty. Yes. There's a lot of wines. So flinty, I would find that in a lot of Burgundies, Chablis, Pouilly-Fuissé can be flinty. It's like in Loire. A lot of French wines can have that. There's so many. A lot of wines that are like less kind of fruity. If you're volcanic, to me, like Etna wines as an example, or any other wines that are associated with a volcanic, or like Santorini or something, they can be kind of flinty smoky to me. So yeah, depending on the terroir where the wine comes from, can really represent the minerality that's in the soil. Limestone, tannic. Okay, thank you, T-Palm. Drinking a Cali red blend, it auto-corrected to Petite Sriracha, but I know you mean Petite Syrah, Zinfandel, and Merlot. Okay, cool. Probably like, I'm assuming this is like south of Napa. So, okay, here's a cool thing about, okay, awesome. So you have a couple wines coming in. I know, not Sriracha, Syrah. I know, I gotcha. Okay, so the blends. I love when people say I'm drinking a red blend. Blends are great. We love blends. Now, blends have been around forever. Now, I think to a typical, American person who's into red wine, here in the States, we think of Cabernet, Chardonnay, Merlot, Syrah, Zinfandel, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio as single varietal or single variety wines are like super common. However, historically, that was not the case. Because way back when, in the history years, different types of grapes would have been grown together. And wine was much harder to make, right? They didn't have the technology and the temperature control that we have now. So because of the variety of the weather, from vintage to vintage. You never knew what you were going to get. Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cool? Is it going to be rainy? Is there going to be more fungus or mildew this year? Like, you don't know what you're going to get. And within that, you may have, okay, so you're growing Cabernet, you're growing Merlot, you're growing Malbec. And then one year, it's a Cabernet year. So you're going to use more Cabernet in your blend. And then the Merlot did okay, but you're still going to blend everything in, right? And you're going to, as the winemaker or the farmer or whoever, going to use all of your grapes and kind of come up with the most balanced blend, the most palatable blend for that vintage. Next vintage, it might be totally different, and you're going to have to work with what you have. So blends serve a really important purpose in wine because it allows the winemaker to get the best final product with what they're given, especially historically when they had less control than we have now. Now we have all this technology, and we're still, yes, dependent on the weather, but because of the technology, we're able to better counter the weather, and even so far as removing alcohol from wine when it's a super hot vintage and your alcohol content is so high. So blends have been around forever. If you've heard of Bordeaux wine, all Bordeaux is pretty much a blend because historically that's what it is. So just, yeah, little info on blends. And then the next one, Amarone, oh, high roller. Okay, so we have a Chianti / well, can't be. So maybe we have Chianti or Amarone because they're two different things. So Chianti is from Tuscany, Sangiovese. Amarone is coming from up north, like the Veneto, which is kind of around Venice area. And that's made from like dried grapes that are super concentrated. So Amarone tends to be very like unctuous, voluptuous, has quite a bit of, it's not a sweet wine, it's not like a dessert wine, but it's quite sweeter, very like velvety and full-bodied on the palate. It's Amarone, okay. She got excited there. And then where were we? I know there was a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo from my grandparents are Abruzzese, so on my dad's side. Okay, what else? Hey, Karen. Raisinish, yeah, Amarone, it's raisin grapes. So the grapes are partially raisined and they make the wine from that juice. And I believe it's also blended. So you have a little bit higher alcohol and a little bit higher sugar content. And then, but your end product is like super concentrated and yes, very much notes of dried fruit. But a good one will have components of freshness and dryness, in my opinion, as well. You don't want like a totally dry, like, cooked fruit type of thing. I think there's a balance there that you want to go. What's it called? Okay, question. Hey, Shan. What's it called when a red wine feels tart or dry on my tongue? Which types of wine? Stay away from that. Okay, so I think there's a few questions in here. So a wine tart, okay, so tart and dry I'm going to say are two separate things. Tart would refer to a combination, the amount of acidity for sure. So you have higher acid, and that's really tartness. And I think sometimes if the wine doesn't have a lot of residual sugar in it to balance the acidity, it's going to come across as being more tart, like a sweet tart, right? So tartness and acidity are linked. The feeling of dryness in a red wine is different. Okay. And also dryness as a word is a problem. So we're going to define it as it relates to wine. So in wine, dry and sweet are on polar opposite ends of the spectrum. So you have a sweet wine and you have a dry wine. Now, when you take a sip of a red wine, pretending it's red, oh, what is this? What is this dryness? What is this tingliness? Or like shrivelly kind of thing, right? On your tongue. Sometimes you hate that. Some people really don't like that. That's tannin. So a wine that's tannic has a lot of tannins. And the tannins come mostly from the skins of the grape. Also the seeds, but a lot of times, I don't know, it's really the skins. Certain grapes just naturally have thicker skins, and therefore they tend to have more tannins. And so when the wine is being made, for a red wine anyway, the skin is in contact with the juice for an extended period of time. That pigmentation and the tannins and all that stuff that's in the skin kind of goes into the juice, and that's where you get the tannin, and that's where you get the color as well. So I hope, okay, what the rest of that tannin question was, which types of wine stay away from that. So it depends on the grapes. So Pinot Noir is a classic example of a thin-skinned red grape. So you typically don't have a lot of tannin in Pinot Noir. Other wines, or grapes, I guess you could say, that don't have a lot of tannin, Gamay. So Gamay is, you find that mostly in a wine called Beaujolais from France. Malbec doesn't really have a lot of tannin. There's a lot. Grenache doesn't really have a ton, kind of in the middle. So Grenache or Garnacha, Spain. It kind of depends. Trying to think, like I said, Zinfandel, again, it depends. It can be like medium. Things that have a lot of tannin, for sure. Cabernet Sauvignon. Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, which is the grape that's in Chianti. Oh, sorry, and Nebbiolo, sorry, I should be clear here. Nebbiolo is the grape in Barolo and Barbaresco. Sangiovese is the grape in Chianti and Brunello. Those have more tannins. Another one, when I said Barolo, I thought of another wine that's not very tannic, Barbera d'Alba, which is from Piedmont, Italy. There's so many, and now I can't think of anything. Syrah, Syrah, yes and no. Syrah is like in the middle, or Shiraz. Somebody I know had a Shiraz today from Australia, Ashley. I'm curious. I don't know if she's popped in yet. I'm curious how she's enjoying it. Hi, LBD. Oh, do I have a personal favorite Amarone? Okay, yeah. So I was lucky enough back in my early Somm days to do the Quintarelli Amarone, Giuseppe Quintarelli. And those are like some of the best Amarones out there. I probably couldn't afford one right now. Maybe if this wine thing gets going a little more. Those were just unbelievable. But they're like a meal. For me, I mean, I don't even think I could eat it with food. I think I would have to eat it with food. But it's so rich and just unbelievably deep, complex. The complexity is just off the charts. Those were so delicious. What does the thickness of last year on a roll? Does the thickness of the grape skin have anything to do with it? Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the thickness of the grape skin will contribute to the tannin and to the pigment of the wine. So if you have thin, you're not going to get as much tannin and pigmentation versus a thicker skinned grape. So absolutely. As it goes back to Amarone, and I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, that's more of a process that makes the deepest concentration, that deep concentration. No problem. All right, let's see if I miss some. Guys, questions. Need more questions. Just don't know who's tennis. Okay. All right, so all right, let's just go back to the Gruet as some more questions come in. So this is the blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And if you okay, do people want to know about rosé? Do you know what rosé is? That's a question. Can you recommend a rosé? Okay, so good. I'm so happy. Okay, can you recommend a rosé? Some taste almost like vinegar to me. Interesting. So I think when you're perceiving the vinegar, I think you're perceiving something that's very, very dry and very, very acidic. So going back to that, we were quick before we talked about sort of tartness in a wine. I think lack of sugar and high acidity is going to give you that vinegar perception, even though it's not actually vinegar. Okay, so I'm trying to think of a rosé that, Italian. Okay, Italian rosés. And they're called rosato, right? Rosato. Those are, for me, the ones I've had, because it's a little bit warmer climate, those are lower acidity, fuller bodied, yet they're still dry, but not bone dry. That's where I would go. Chiaretto is a type of rosé that's quite colored. The thing is, A lot of people tend towards the really pale pink ones because they're trendy. That's it. They're just kind of trendy right now. But don't discount the slightly darker colored rosés. It doesn't mean they're going to be sweet. What it does mean is they're going to be more food friendly and versatile because they have fuller body, and they're a little bit richer, and they're not always like so bone dry. They just have a little more lushness and softness on the palate. And Shan, I think you will enjoy. Go to a good wine shop, like in your area. Kind of find a place that's not just that place in the strip mall. Nothing wrong with the strip mall. You may get a good place, but you know what I'm talking about. Like the kind of dinky places. Like go to a nice place. Go in the rosé section. I highly recommend talking to a person that works there, because if you're in a good wine shop, they're going to really know their stuff, and they'll kind of lead you in the right direction. So just say, you know, I don't really like the rosés that are super acidic and dry. I like something a little bit not sweet, but like something in the middle. And they would hook you up. But if you're on your own, try Italian rosé, and American too, I think. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting. Spanish, you could do Spanish. I think Spanish rosés you would also do well. Like maybe the French aren't for you. Correct me now. Blends for rosé. Well, all right. Real quick question: was my favorite, the best wine I ever had? That was easy. It was a Burgundy, so it was a Pinot Noir from France. And this was back at my TW days when I worked in Cambridge. And I had that, that was really, when I worked at TW Food in Cambridge in like starting from 2007 to 2011, that is where I grew up. Like I was a baby when I went in there, not age-wise, but experience, like in terms of fine dining, wine. I didn't know anything. I thought I knew something. I didn't know anything. And Tim and Bronwyn owned the restaurant, and they were incredible. Like I hope it would be awesome if Bronwyn was on. I don't think she is, but I owe so much to them because they just taught me so much. They invested in me. They gave me incredible experiences, and that restaurant, they made me taste food I would have never normally tasted. And also working there, we had people bringing in incredible wine. There was a gentleman who was a customer, and he had owned an importing company, and he had an incredible collection. He would just come in every once in a while and bring like 20 bottles from the 60s, 70s, 80s all the time, and I would get to taste. So this is how I was able to taste what I tasted. So my favorite was 1966 La Tâche. It's a Burgundy, Grand Cru Burgundy. It was just incredible. It was just so interesting. So that's my favorite wine. Blends for rosé. Yeah, rosé is not always a blend, so you may have a Pinot Noir. That would be pretty classic. A lot of times, Southern Rhone, you would have Grenache blended with Syrah, with Mourvedre, maybe some Carignan thrown in. Spain, you might have a Garnacha-based rosé, Masuelo. American, it could be anything. Not typically Cabernet. No, more Pinot Noir. I feel like I'm saying I've gotta cut that out for next time. What are my other wine areas? I haven't talked about South Africa. I don't think they make a ton of rosé from what I've seen. Thinking. There's probably some big ones I'm missing right now. Surely. What else? Anybody who has wine, what are you guys drinking? All right, let's talk about, since I'm waiting here, let's talk about more what I have. This is sparkling wine made in the method, how do we say this? Méthode champenoise, or the méthode traditionnelle, or the traditional champagne method. What's cool about the traditional champagne method is that this second fermentation, so there's two fermentations. The one is where you make it into wine from juice. They bottle that, and they cap it, and they allow it to ferment again in the bottle. And when it ferments, the carbon dioxide is released, and that's what causes the bubbles. It also gives, because the yeast is in the bottle, it adds a lot of complexity to the wine, which is why there is a big difference between something like Prosecco and something like champagne. Because not only are the bubbles different, but there's a greater depth of flavor from the yeast. Now, that being said, so you have in Champagne, it has to be made in that way. Now, you have other parts of the world that use that same method. And typically, it's a very tedious method because there's turning of the bottles. It's a big process. And so typically, it's expensive to hold on to these bottles and to keep them. And the bottles have to be really strong so they don't explode everywhere. So there's an investment there. So if something's method traditionelle, or the traditional champagne method, it tends to be a higher quality and a higher price point. What's really cool is Cava is made in the same method, but it's often quite a friendly price point. And Cava is a sparkling wine coming from Spain. And they use some of the grapes of Champagne, like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but really they also use a lot of their own varieties, like Parellada, Charolais, Macabeo, and there's probably a whole bunch more that I'm not thinking of right now. This is the traditional method. So in Gruet, if you missed the beginning, New Mexico, Gruet, Gruet, they've been around for a while, but they do really high quality sparkling wine coming out of like just north of Albuquerque. And this is Pinot Noir and Chardonnay blend. It's just so good and it's very affordable. And this is also their Sauvage, which is a no added sugar, so a non-dosage wine. So it's very dry. And if you're like really, really with the no sugar counting calories, that's okay. I mean, most of these champagnes are just such a tiny bit added anyway. It's imperceivable and it's really just for balance. But these have a little bit more bracing acidity because there's no added sugar. Okay, do I have a favorite Pinot Noir? What do I drink? Oh, okay. Do I have a favorite Pinot Noir? Well, all right. If I'm going to drink Pinot Noir, I would love to go to Burgundy, which is in France, right? Because that's sort of like the birthplace, I guess you could say. Probably not historically, but I'm just going to say it that way. Birthplace of Pinot Noir would be in Burgundy. But here's the thing. It's very expensive to get a good bottle. So you can get an entry level, they call Bourgogne Rouge. You can get an entry level Bourgogne Rouge for like $20. They're not like the best. Okay, they're okay. They're not the best. They're usually like quite light and super fruity and not that interesting because Pinot Noir is a very, very finicky grape to grow. That's like what all the wine people love to say. Pinot Noir is a finicky grape. It's hard to grow. It's hard to get a good Pinot Noir. So when you can get a good one, it's going to cost a lot of money. So when you're in Burgundy, there's beautiful Pinot Noirs. They're very, very costly. So yeah, give me any of those. I'll drink them all, right? Like the higher end, the Premier Cru, Grand Cru. They're unbelievable. If we're being a little bit more reasonable, if we're going to talk about American style, California is cool, but it has its own unique style. For me, I go north, and I love Oregon Pinot Noirs, and they're specificically the Willamette Valley. Spelled Willamette. People say Willamette, but I'm like kind of a stickler for pronunciation. So when I went out there in like 2008, I was able to remember the correct pronunciation because this woman working at the winery had a t-shirt and it said, "It's Willamette, damn it," so I could never forget it. So anyway, Willamette Valley. And what I really enjoy about the Pinot Noirs from there is that they have like an earthy, more darker fruit, mushroomy vibe to them. So for me, they're a little bit more of the Burgundian style versus the super like flashy in your face, what has been like traditionally a California style. They're a little more restrained. I guess that's the way I would put it. A little more restrained for me and earthier tones to them. So Willamette Valley is where I would go. And back in my TW days, I loved Soter Vineyards, Soter. They're just a smaller production, but I always really loved them. They did a lot of different Pinot Noirs. However, going into California, I would go with the Sonoma Coast, and they call it the extreme Sonoma Coast, so very, very close to the Pacific, to the, I guess, the water, the I don't know what it is. I know it's the Pacific Ocean, but I don't know if there's like a bay, what the bay is, but anyway. They are cooler climate. The climate is more moderated, and it's very harsh, and it's higher elevation. So there's so many wineries out there now, but like I'm thinking immediately of Flowers, Hirsch. Those are some, gosh, I don't want to like not say any, but there's so many that are there. I'm not remembering them all right now. but like Flowers and Hirsch and just look extreme Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. And those are super elegant, but they're pricey. You know, they're not every day, but they're delicious if you want to kind of indulge for a special occasion or something. Or if you're loaded, go for it. Charles Smith. Charles Smith. I'll just say this about Charles Smith because I haven't had most recently. I did taste a line of some Italian varieties. I think there was like a Barbera and a Sangiovese Charles Smith, and they're calling it Casa Smith. And I think I had the Barbera, and I think I enjoyed it quite, but I haven't had those Syrahs in quite a long time, so I don't know. But yeah, Washington, okay, Washington's great. Like, I haven't even explored Washington wines as much as I would like to. I just don't find them around that much. But yeah, Washington for your Cabernets, your Syrahs, your Merlots, kind of like your Bordeaux style and your kind of Rhone style to an extent. Washington State, definitely go for some. They're really, really quality at a more friendly price point than Napa. Oh, yeah. Because local wine is the question. All right, so if you're going to do local, first of all, I live in Connecticut now, but I've only been here a couple years. I really haven't tasted around Connecticut as much as I would like, so I don't want to say too much right now because I don't think it would be fair. That being said, for local, if you're in New England or the Northeast, a lot of New Yorkers here, definitely go out to, Eastern Long Island, North Fork and South Fork. The North Fork has more wineries, but good quality on the South Fork as well. Really good stuff. Like, not everything's amazing, but definitely check it out. And then the Finger Lakes is even better. So Finger Lakes is really known for their whites. Predominantly Riesling is really fantastic, and they do dry and sweet Riesling. So if you're not a fan of sweet, don't worry, there's plenty for you. And they're even doing some great Cabernet Francs and a lot of whites that I'm not like super familiar with, more lesser known varieties that they're kind of experimenting with in the Finger Lakes. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to go, but like, if your good wine shops will have a selection. I actually did a wine tasting for a couple for this woman's birthday, and they were just fascinated by New York wines. So I specifically chose a few wines from the Finger Lakes and from the Long Island, Eastern Long Island. And we had a tasting of all these different wines, and heavier on the whites for sure, but really good. I think don't like poo-poo it because they're really coming along. And thank you to global warming, or the earth is getting hotter regardless of your views on it. It's happening. So it's not great, but it's good for the wine world. So a little controversy in there. Yeah, Finger Lakes, definitely. It's Willamette, damn it. Right now you're never gonna forget it. And that's how it's stuck in my head too. All right, I'm gonna take, obviously my voice is getting a little dry from talking. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, I think, all right, so I'm gonna probably wrap it up kind of soon. It's been about a half hour. If anybody has any more questions. Okay, here's one thing I want to put out to the world. And then I just had one more thought after that. I don't know. So I think I'm going to do this again on a weekly basis. Oh, Pouilly-Fuissé. Okay. All right. I want to answer that too. Pouilly-Fuissé. So Pouilly-Fuissé is a Chardonnay coming from Burgundy. Delicious. Delicious. It's a little bit south in Burgundy. It's a great value. Not like a $10 wine, but it's a good value if you, okay, so if you're like, oh man, I hate oaky, buttery Chardonnays, right? Some people hate that. But you want to experience like pure Chardonnay. Pouilly-Fuissé is a great option. I don't have a favorite, no. Okay. And how did I get involved? All right, so perfect. I'll answer these last couple ones before, and then I want to say a few things. How did I get involved with wine? Well, because I dropped out of grad school, I was going to Emerson in Boston, and I was going to be a speech pathologist. And there was a lot happening in my life at that time. But basically, I started working in restaurants, and I had always like really been into food. And first I started at like a crappy place, cocktail waitressing, and then I kind of slowly got to like better and better places over time. But then like I said, when I got to TW, that's really where my world opened up, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, the owners were like, I was managing, and they were like, well, if you need to know about wine. And I was like, oh, I know about wine. I didn't really. I thought I knew some California stuff. Like, that's really kind of what my basis was. When I started tasting the wines of the world, it started to click, and I was like, this is very interesting. I'd like to learn more. And I just was pretty much self-taught from there, and I eventually got certified as a Somm, but it was really just I had access to wine all the time. So, I was a buyer, and I would go to tastings all the time and learn and ask questions. And I think being open-minded and not I had a title of, I was the wine buyer and like the Somm or whatever. I had the title probably sooner, but than most people would have. I mean, I certainly had an interest and a base knowledge, but I wasn't like super knowledgeable. But I think I was also very open to learning, and I wasn't like trying to act like I knew something. I would just be like asking a lot of questions and not being afraid to feel stupid if I asked kind of a obvious or a dumb question. So I was just very open to it. So I learned pretty quickly because of that, I think, and just constantly being able to taste, All right, yeah. Oh gosh, what am I going to drink next time? Okay, this is really good. So let me touch upon what I want to do next week. So tonight it's Friday. I wasn't able to do it the past couple nights, but I was thinking either maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday. Now, I just joined a hip hop class for adults, and that's on Wednesdays. This is something I've been wanting to do for years. And with the kids, and my husband is away for work all the time, and it's unpredictable. So finally, I just did it, and I have no idea how I'm going to get to these classes. So we'll all figure that out together. So that's Wednesdays. So now I think, okay, Thursdays. And I think I want to do a throwback to Thirsty Thursdays when we were all young. And some of you are young, but when we were just in the college days and all that in our 20s, Thirsty Thursdays. And I think it's also a good point in the week that you might want to have a glass of wine, or even a glass of alcohol-free wine or whatever. So I think that's going to be the new night. And I think 8:15 possibly, or 8:30. Okay. And yeah, bring it exactly. If you want to represent Thirsty Thursdays of our college days, bring a 40, bring a Zima, bring a wine cooler. When I was in my 20s, I was very elegant, so I was drinking fine wine. So I'll have something fancy. No, if you know me, not true, right? Yeah, I know. It took a long time to get here. All right, and one more thing. Okay, I think we're going to do this on Thursdays. And, well, I think that's it, actually. I think I want to save some stuff for next week. That's in my mind. Box wine. I drink box wine. You can see my old Instagrams. I do it. Black House, yes. Jaeger, all the good stuff. Anyway, all right, I've come a long way. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining. On my first, I have a little bit of wine that I will finish here. I'm so glad the kids did not come down and interrupt like I thought they would. So anyway, please come back next Thursday. I'll let you know 8:15 or 8:30 how it's going to work out. I love you guys so much, and thank you, and I'll see you all soon. Good night.